All right, this is the copyright disclaimer. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. And this video is not for any monetary gain. It is explicitly for the reasons stipulated in the Copyright Act of 1976 under Section 107.
After slavery was officially abolished in 1865, the United States told the world that forced labor was over. But in the South, it never really ended. It was just renamed. Beginning in the 1870s, states across the South implemented a system called convict leasing. Newly freed black men were arrested en masse for vague crimes, vagrancy, loitering, not having proof of employment. Charges that barely existed before suddenly filled court dockets. Once convicted, prisoners were leased to private companies, coal mines in Alabama, turpentine camps in Florida, railroads in Georgia, plantations across Mississippi and Texas. The state made money, corporations got free labor, and black men lost their freedom all over again. The conditions were brutal. Leased prisoners were beaten, starved, chained, and worked to death. Unlike slavery, there was no incentive to keep workers alive. If one died, the state simply arrested another. Mortality rates were staggering. In some camps, 1 in 4 prisoners died within a year. Children were not exempt. Teen boys were arrested and sent to labor camps alongside adults. Records describe bodies buried in unmarked graves, families never notified, names erased from official memory. This system continued for decades. Some states didn't formally end convict leasing until the early 1900s. By then, thousands were dead, and countless families were destroyed. This wasn't a loophole. It was written into law. Some historians say slavery ended. Others show how it was rebuilt, using handcuffs instead of chains. Stay with these stories. They expose how freedom can exist on paper while cruelty thrives in practice.
This is the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 10, and it reads, For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. Giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rahakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well in teaching me this 100% truth. Salutations to them and my fellow Akim who labor in this truth week in and week out on the highways and byways. Also, salutations to the hopeful elect of the scattered 12 tribes of Israel, scattered to the four corners of the earth, that be like unto the speckled bird, also known as your Israelite foreigners and your so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. To you, I say Shalom. This is your brother Ayashar Barzal, a prophet of doom from the Indianapolis branch of the Great Millstone, coming back at you with another lesson that is edifying to the elect body of the nation of Israel. All right, we're going to get into this article about the Emancipation Proclamation, which was signed January 1st, 1863. That's 163 years ago. All right. And that Emancipation Proclamation was not about the freedom of the slaves. Okay. Let's go ahead and get into the article. This article is from one of our sources called EJI, which is Equality Justice Initiative. All right. And this is yet another installment of our camp series called For Thy Violence Against Thy Brother Jacob. All right. We're, over 170 videos at this point, and that does really doesn't even scratch the surface to what this devil, Esau Edom, who is the so-called white man, okay, led by Amalek. We know that slavery was with them. Okay, it yeah, we know that's how it started. Okay, and not only did they finance the transatlantic slave trade, they own the ships and the insurance companies. Okay, the facts don't lie. All right, but this is another Emancipation Proclamation. When you go into that word, emancipate, it really means transfer of ownership, which is exactly what that did. Okay, um, it was a transfer of ownership from private slave owners to the federal government, as revealed by the 13th Amendment. Okay, slavery is over unless you become a felon. You know, so yeah, it's not over to this date. They still do it and still profit from it. Okay, still profit from it. That's why they have all these prisons that have to be occupied, and we know who owns and runs those too. So uh, the same folks that once again, not only finance the transatlantic slave trade, but they own the ships and the insurance companies. All right, so we're going to really get into this article, and I'll put some scriptures to it. All right, and here we go. Again, this is from EJI, Equality Justice Initiative. I'll put a link to this article in the description box. All right, for your own leisure and reading. All right, it says, on this day, January 1st, 1863, like I said, 163 years ago, enslavement only partially banned by Emancipation Proclamation. All right. It says slavery was not abolished by the issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. Issued in the midst of the Civil War, the proclamation applied only to enslaved people in states that were in rebellion in 1863, namely South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Arkansas, and North Carolina. And there's still major problems with these states to this very day. All right. It says Tennessee and portions of Virginia and Louisiana that were occupied by the Union were exempt. Slavery was left untouched in the borders states of Maryland, Delaware, Kentucky, and Missouri. It says many Southern enslavers in rebelling states attempted to hide news of the proclamation from enslaved people, using threats and violence to force silence and attacking those who dared attempted to flee. Where federal troops were present, however, many enslaved people courageously fled bondage and sought protection from freedom in Union camps. All right, and we know, uh, not to get off on a different subject. Uh, the North, Edomites, so-called white people from the North and South, are no different. They're the same people. Two wings of the same buzzard. Okay, point blank. Period. Because when you go into the story of the Devil's Punch Bowl, which happened in Natchez, Mississippi, it was Union soldiers that led that. All right. But like I said, that's another lesson. It goes on. For many more enslaved people living where federal forces were absent or unreachable, Lincoln's declaration did nothing, and the hold of enslavement lasted well beyond 1863. Up until the war's end in 1865, local newspapers in Montgomery, Alabama continued to advertise auction sales of enslaved people and publish ads seeking the return of runaways. Hmm. Says exercising his powers as commander in chief, President Abraham Lincoln issued the proclamation primarily as a wartime measure. Key provisions allowing for the service of formerly enslaved black people in the Union Army and Navy opened the door to the gradual enlistment of almost 200,000 black men. All right, and we know how the stories are well documented and out there. Fighting for this place, you were still a nigger to them. Okay, point blank. Period. Still a nigga to them. A lot of Jakes came home, were brutalized and killed. All right, thinking serving in the military was going to make them see you any different. No, it's not going to happen. All right. It goes on. Slavery did not become illegal until the 13th Amendment was officially ratified on December 6, 1865, though even then the provision allowed for legal enslavement as punishment for a crime. And that's according to the federal government. All right. And then here's what we need you to know. It was ratified December 6, 1865. So from the time that the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in January 1st, 1863, you had almost another 2 and 3/4, almost 3 years, where those states were now passing those, making those black codes in the law. Okay, for things such as loitering, not having a job, that would throw you right back onto the plantation, or in some form of slavery under these corporations. Okay, they were always going to make money off of Jake. All right, it says many southern states refused to ratify the 13th Amendment even after the Civil War ended. Delaware and Kentucky rejected ratification, and slavery persisted in those states for 7 more years before the practice ceased. Mississippi did not officially ratify until 1995, 130 years after it was adopted. All right. So you think, fighting in their military, these people are going to see you as anything more than a slave? No, they're not. They're not. And Jake keeps trying, thinking that this devil, Esau, Edom, the so called white man who is the wicked, according to scriptures, Malachi 1 and 4, thinks that this man is going to change. He's never going to change. What the scriptures say, can a leopard change his spots? Okay. Who could bring a clean thing out of an unclean? No one. All right. That's just the way this devil is. He is created to be the wicked. And, he is, always will be, and is going to be until he's taken out of power. All right. So yeah, so that's pretty much it about that Emancipation Proclamation. But once again, you know, uh, keep in mind the issue for Jake, in this land has always been the U.S. government. That's not that's no secret. Currently, right now, you have a bill that was introduced into the 118th Congress. I think that was 2023, 2024. House Bill number 4321, saying that any municipality, state, or local government putting forth legislation that calls for reparations for the descendants of slaves, that they would not receive any federal aid. Yeah, you can look that up. I've put it in videos before. Yeah, this place is not our rest. Okay, it's not. We're here on a punishment. Let me get that. This is the book of Micah, chapter 2 and verse 10, and it reads, "Arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest." Talking about America, aka Babylon the Great, because it is polluted. Yeah, and they even in their according to their own words, oh, America is a great melting pot. Well, no, we're supposed to be separate and holy, according to Deuteronomy 7 and 6 and 14 and 2. Okay, we're the only nation with the law, statutes, and commandments, according to Psalms 147, verse 19 and 20. Okay, we have a standard above all people, but Jake, want to be like everybody else, never happy. All right, and this place is polluted, defiled with everything against the scriptures. All right, and we're seeing that. You just had this thing going around where they talking about having the Ten Commandments in all the schools. The commandments were never for the heathen nations. So putting those in schools makes it useless. Now, the time is going to come where you will obey those, but we will be in those new bodies and have the new covenant within our inward parts. Okay. So what you're trying to do now and getting the Ten Commandments in all of the schools, that's futile. No, that is futile. It's a waste of time. Besides, again, the law was only given to the Israelites, but when the time comes, you will obey. You know, or if you don't obey, you're going to get the judgment from the 144,000 rulers and judges. And what else does it also say about not serving? This is Isaiah chapter 60. I believe it's 12. It says, "For the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish. Yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted." So that's what you got to look forward to, you heathen nations, especially you, Esau, Edom, and Amalek, the most proud of the nations, the one who have been putting hell on us for the longest time. All right. Yeah. You're going to be utterly wasted. And we know that you're not going to change. What Isaiah 26 and 10 say, let favor be shown to the wicked, yet they will not learn righteousness. Okay. You're never going to be right because that's the way the Most High created you. Likewise, in the same, He created you as that vessel of destruction. Okay, when that time comes, and it's near, you all know it because those curses are starting to turn, according to Deuteronomy 30 and 7. All right, so yeah, that's what it says here. You don't want to serve. It says, you're going to be utterly wasted. You're going to perish. All right, back to that Micah 2 and 10. Yeah, it says, "Arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest." And that doesn't mean to physically leave. All right, that means to come out of the ways of Babylon the Great. You can start by not eating those filthy abominations: pork, crab, lobster, catfish, scallops. You know, stop sleeping with your neighbor's wife, adultery. Okay, there's a number of things you can do. Okay, to do to rehearse the righteous acts. You know, we know we can't keep the law perfectly because we're not in that land. Plus, we're here serving a punishment. All right. And like I said, this place, if you don't arise and depart, it's going to destroy you, and it has destroyed a lot of Jake mentally. Social media is something else at this time when it comes to Jake turning his ear from hearing the law, and being obedient to it. That's why we're in this situation right now. All right. Says, yeah, so it will destroy you even with a sword destruction. And we see that happening with a lot of Jake right now, murdering each other for the simplest things, you know. And hey, we just, waiting on the Lord to come back, man, but doing this work instead, because hey, we got to get up out of here. All right. But yeah, you all are trusting in these devils, thinking things are going to change for the Israelites for the better when it's not. This place is not our rest. That's what it's telling you right here. The only time Israel is going to rest is when we are back in our own land that's currently being occupied by the worst of people, right? We know who they are. Okay, the people you can't talk about. All right. So yeah, this is the book of Baruch. It's in the Apocrypha, chapter 3 and verse 8. And it reads, "Behold, we are yet this day in our captivity, yet this day in our captivity, where thou hast scattered us for a reproach and a curse, and subject to payments according to all the iniquities of our fathers, which departed from Yahweh our power. All right. So we're here on punishment. Ain't no coming together. Ain't no, getting our own plot of land, trying to build. We're here on punishment. You know, we're not supposed to prosper over here. And yet, even though some have, by a flick of a switch, that can be taken away from them too. Ask Kanye. you know, just saying. It's just the way it is. But that, like I said, it never freed the slaves. All right. It's Isaiah chapter 10, verse 1. It says, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees and write grievousness which they have prescribed." All right. That 13th Amendment, a way to keep you in slavery. And like I said, after that was passed by Congress, up to the time it was ratified, they were taking all those black codes and turning them into laws. All right. So they can send Jake right back to the plantation that he came from. All right. So they know what they were doing the whole time. All right. It says to turn aside the needy, who the Israelites, from judgment, and to take away the right from the poor of my people. All right. His people being the Israelites. That widows may be their prey and that they may rob the fatherless. Okay. Rule, the law that comes to mind about that part is the man out of the house rule. You remove the man, the women and children are easily to take over. And in some cases, and we know in two cases when the Lord came on the scene. All right, that's one. And then in Exodus, you know, the decree was to kill all the male children. Okay, you take out all the males, there goes the nation. All right. So yeah, this is what we're dealing with. You know, So from that Emancipation Proclamation all the way to that House Bill number 4321, Jake is never going to receive money for that. As the scriptures say, no man is going to save us. All right. Especially Esau Edom. He has that perpetual hatred for us because of the birthright. All right. You'll get that perpetual hatred in what's that, Amos 1 and 11, as well as Ezekiel 35, 5 and 6. Yeah. So we cannot be dependent on these people. You know, Lord, is making certain of that by the way they're still treating us. You still trying to put your trust in man, and it's just not going to work. All right. This is the book of Psalms. Um, which one was I looking for? Salakia. Psalms 94 and I'll say verse 20. Con. Psalms chapter 94, verse 20, and it reads, "Shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frameth mischief by law?" And who's that throne of iniquity? Esau Edom, beginning with Amalek, the first of the nation, the chief nation that's running everything, according to Numbers 24 and 20. All right. Which frameth mischief by law. That House Bill number 4321, this Emancipation Proclamation, all of these laws are made to keep Jake ensnared, and Jake is not seeing it. All right, falling into that trap. You know, they bring guns and stuff into your neighborhood via trains. You don't have to touch them. Same way with drugs. You don't have to touch them. Okay, you gotta say no, Jake. You gotta say no. All right, because they have the power. Job 9 and 24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. They have the power to make these laws and legislation right now. All right. Verse 21, Psalms 94. It says, they gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous and condemn the innocent blood. Yeah. What does the scripture say? They sleep not unless they cause some to fall. All right. I think that's Proverbs 4 and 16. I think. Let me see here. Proverbs 4, 16. Con. It says, for they sleep not except they have done mischief. All right. That's why you can turn on C-SPAN and CNN real late at night and see them still up passing laws and stuff. All right. It says, and their sleep is taken away unless they cause someone to fall. Yep. Definitely look to keep Jake in perpetual bondage and trouble. Okay. Man, it says, verse 17, for they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. You know, and, they just have to be wicked. It's wickedness, like it says, they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. That's how they are nourished, by being wicked and being violent. All right. Go back to that Psalms 94. All right. It says, yeah, they gather themselves together against the soul of the righteous and condemn the innocent blood. Yeah. With their legislation and their laws. You know, I mean, it is what it is, Jake. It is what it is. But, you gotta, these people are not here to help us. They're here, to destroy us. That's what they want to do. And they do it through their legislation, as you saw here with, the Emancipation Proclamation. Is not what you thought it was. All right. It does not mean freeing of the slaves. All right. So with that, I hope this lesson was edifying to the elect body of the nation of Israel. Once again, I'm going to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rahakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders and great millstone who rule well in teaching me this 100% truth. Salutations to them and my fellow Akim who labor in this truth week in and week out on the highways and byways. Also, salutations to the hopeful elect of the scattered 12 tribes of Israel, scattered to the four corners of the earth, that be likened to the speckled bird, also known as your Israelite foreigners and your so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans. To you, I say Shalom, Kwam Yasharala, Abba Babal. Shalom, we got next.